Congresswoman Liz Cheney has suffered an extraordinary loss in Wyoming's House GOP primary race. Trump-backed challenger Harriet Hageman defeated her after promoting the former president's false claim of voter fraud throughout the race. Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa is in Jackson, Wyoming with the very latest. Robert, good morning. When I spoke to you just a couple days ago, you indicated that it was not looking good for Congresswoman Cheney, and I guess it turned out to be the case.
Good morning. Good to be with you here in Jackson, Wyoming. The sun has not even risen yet in this mountain town. But it's true. This race was a contest that was pretty much understood to be going against Cheney. The polls showed her down by about 30 points going into Election Day. But when you step back, you really recognize that this race was a prism into this moment in the Republican Party, the Trump wing at war with many traditional Republicans. And though Congresswoman Cheney did concede in this race, she did not concede in the battle for the future of the Republican Party.
Our work is far from over.
Surrounded by members of a family that have dominated Wyoming politics for decades, including her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney, Congresswoman Cheney accepted defeat.
2 years ago, I won this primary with 73% of the vote. I could easily have done the same again, but it would have required that I go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election. That was a path I could not and would not take.
But Cheney was more defiant than wistful, warning Republican voters that their embrace of former President Trump is a threat to democracy.
No American should support election deniers for any position of genuine responsibility.
Cheney is now the 8th out of 10 House Republicans who voted for Trump's second impeachment following the Capitol attack to be leaving Congress. Trump posted last night that Cheney can finally disappear into the depths of political oblivion, and he congratulated Hageman, who has pushed baseless claims about fraud in the 2020 election.
We're all very grateful to President Trump, who recognizes that Wyoming has only one congressional representative, and we have to make it count.
But Wyoming's Republican primary voters ultimately had the final say.
Liz Cheney has done absolutely nothing in the last 6 months except her hatred for Trump.
Cheney's allies say she is considering a bid for the White House in 2024. But before making that decision, she plans to keep busy as the vice chair of the January 6th committee, which continues to probe the former president's conduct.
I will do whatever it takes to ensure Donald Trump is never again anywhere near the Oval Office, and I mean it.
It was also primary night up there in Alaska. Former Governor Sarah Palin, the 2008 Republican vice presidential nominee, is projected to now be in the general election in her House race, though Palin is still waiting to see if she will fill the remainder of her predecessor's term. On the Senate side, Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, a more moderate Republican in the Senate GOP conference, she is projected to now be in the general election. So is a Trump-backed candidate, Kelly Tshibaka. Anne-Marie?
That should be interesting. But let us talk about Liz Cheney again. You know, she has alluded to possibly running in 2024 in the presidential campaign. She also said that she's going to do whatever it takes, whatever is needed to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office again. But I wonder, you know, what's your latest reporting on how she might do that? With this major loss, does she still have political capital? Does she still have the ability to fundraise? How's she going to go about doing that?
She raised over $13 million for this race. She lost, but she proved that she has a national fundraising base, and that's in part due to her tenure in the House leadership, her family roots in the Republican Party. It goes without saying. Her father's Dick Cheney, the former vice president of the United States. There was some breaking news just a few minutes ago. Congresswoman Cheney and her team have decided to set up a new organization in the coming weeks that will advocate for her views, her belief that American democracy is under threat. And many of her allies and even her critics see this move post-primary so quickly as something that's bringing her closer to a possible 2024 presidential bid. The question is, Should she move forward and try to have a coalition that's Democrats, independents, and Trump skeptical or anti-Trump Republicans? How does that move forward in American politics in a system so dominated by the two-party primary process?
That is a great point. For any other political figure other than Donald Trump, the last couple of weeks should have been terrible. He had to sit for a civil deposition in New York where he had to plead the fifth. He's facing a criminal investigation in New York. And then, of course, these allegations of taking home top secret documents and refusing to hand them over. This should be terrible for your political fortunes. But somehow, Donald Trump remains a formidable contender for the 2024 presidential nomination. How is he keeping his grip on the power when it comes to the Republican Party?
When you look at former President Trump's political standing, when I talk to both voters in the Republican Party and high-ranking officials and elected officials, it's evident that there are two tracks. There's the Trump legal track and the Trump political track. On the Trump legal track, he is facing many challenges, mounting challenges, to say the least. When the Department of Justice and FBI agents raid your home to find documents, not always a perfect legal situation, though we'll have to see how that plays out. He has not been charged with any crime on that front. It's just an ongoing investigation. He's also facing legal scrutiny in New York from the state attorney general, from the Manhattan district attorney, and, of course, from congressional investigators on Capitol Hill about his role in and around the January 6th Capitol attack. But the Trump political front is a place where he is scoring some primary wins. In fact, many of his candidates are doing very well in red states and states that lean a little bit more conservative. And he has positioned himself as someone who could be the 2024 Republican presidential nominee. Though it's important to recognize the party is bigger than Trump. He may be dominant. But, for example, Glenn Youngkin, the Virginia governor who won last year, he was in Jackson, Wyoming, this town, just a few days ago, speaking to Republican donors. We're told by our sources he's making inroads with them. So you have Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, former Vice President Mike Pence making a trip to New Hampshire this week. A lot of others who could be rivals, different contenders in 2024. They're making their own moves, even though Trump remains a powerful force.
Before I let you go, let me ask you a quick question about the primaries in Alaska. Sarah Palin, the rise of Sarah Palin, who, really, Robert, was sort of Trump before Trump. A lot of, the things that she sort of campaigned on were very similar. And then the TV personality that she developed into are certainly many of the same things that Donald Trump advocates as well. But now the political landscape is awash with Trump-like candidates. I wonder just, how Sarah Palin is doing in Alaska.
It's an important point you made, because when the story of Trump is ultimately told by history, my guess is that the Sarah Palin story will be part of how we understand the Trump story. When I began my reporting career, it was around 2008, the time of the economic collapse, the trouble on Wall Street, the different bailouts of financial institutions. Inside the Republican Party at that time, there was anger at the establishment and what happened on foreign policy with President George W. Bush. There was anger about the bailouts of different banks, and that anger led to grievance inside the base, and it led to what would soon be called populism and nationalism inside the Republican Party, and an anger towards the national press, towards established institutions in this country. That fueled Palin's vice presidential candidacy in 2008. It fueled the Tea Party movement in 2009, 2010, among many other things. Their vitriol and their dislike for President Obama, among others. But then Palin, the Tea Party, essentially coupled together with an anti-immigration reform sentiment inside the GOP and led to the Trump movement in 2014, 2015, 2016. And that coalescing of all those different forces in the GOP is still with us today.
Yeah, and Alaska is implementing sort of a novel election process. So it's going to be a while probably till we see really who's emerging as a front runner in these races. Robert, thank you very much.